life is precious. We only get one chance. You don't know when it's going to be over. To carry my best friend Tanner's legacy forward, to go help more people. I mean, to do all these things, like this is clearly the universe sending me a signal that now is the time. So I, obviously got through the grief and did all of that, healthy emotional processing. But once I was ready to reload, man, it's been gung-ho from there. We've launched Transcend Health, my business. I'm writing a book, as you know, which will be out this fall. And the mission is to help people live longer, healthier, more impactful lives. And all through just educating people on lifestyle and really just the basic, easy choices they have in front of them.
You're listening to the 7-Figure Leap podcast. We're here to leverage rich relationships and smart strategies to take your business to the next level. Here's your host, Dustin Riekman.
Welcome back to the 7-Figure Leap podcast. I believe this is my first neurologist as a guest today, and I'm really excited to spend some time and be able to tap into the wisdom that Dr. Ryan Williamson has to share here. So Ryan and I were introduced with a mutual friend, Amber Vilhauer, who is actually a former guest of our podcast and a close friend of mine, and someone who leads with mission and leads with service. And as I got to know Ryan a little bit, I was like, I really need to have you on the podcast, because not only does he have an amazing story that we're going to unpack about why he does what he does and the mission he has in this world, he has some very practical knowledge to share with entrepreneurs about mental health and stress and overwhelm and a lot of the things that we deal with in our day-to-day adventure here as business owners. So Ryan, thanks so much for being here, first and foremost. And I'm going to hand the mic over to you to kick us off and tell us a little bit about, how you became an entrepreneur, because I know your story selfishly, and I'm really excited to hear you talk about this journey and some of the reasons why you feel compelled to do the work that you're now doing.
Thank you, Dustin. I'm very happy to be here and be with your audience. So it's a pleasure, honestly. I guess to start, my journey is very similar to many that feel called into healthcare. I experienced some loss when I was younger, and that really got some early gears turning around how I could just go help people, whether people end up as physicians, nurses, or anywhere in between. Pretty common path. So I knew I wanted to be a doctor. Certainly by the time I was 18, my parents would tell you when I was maybe 5 or something.
Yeah. And your mom was like, please be the doctor. Right?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, part of that, there may be some truth. Not to, take a bit of a dark turn early here, but I lost my first relative that I knew personally when I was 5. So my grandmother died. I remember, it's actually the opening introduction of my book, is me sitting at her funeral wondering why my mom's crying. I have that distinct memory. And like I said, it really, really started to turn gears early. So go through the medical training pipeline and decide I fell in love with neurology in the brain. I just think it's the most fascinating organ, because without it, we aren't able to do any of this, right? Hearts and kidneys are cool, but the brain for what that's worth. But then parallel story. So I obviously went through the military, as you and I've talked about. So, did the Navy route. They paid for medical school, and then some time after residency, and always felt called to serve. I wasn't going to be a door kicker, so to speak, or infantry, but knew that I wanted to support those men and women, because I have just unbelievable respect and love for that community. Still put on the uniform myself, still was an officer, the whole nine, but again, was on the support side, obviously. So did that until mid-2022. And then once my service was done, I knew I wanted to take a different direction with my career, but wasn't entirely sure what. And so I went back into civilian medicine and started doing some travel work. But as a neurologist, I see people through really the whole spectrum of life. I see young people that have migraines and peripheral nerve injuries and traumatic brain injuries, which is kind of the military cohort. That's pretty common, all those conditions. But then as we get to midlife and later, other things start showing up. So people start having strokes, and they have heart attacks, and they end up with dementias like Alzheimer's and things like this. And I started realizing how sad it was to start seeing this time and time again, because so many of these cases, the vast majority of these cases are preventable. And as you and I have talked about, your lifestyle accounts for somewhere between 70 to 90% of your health outcomes. And I think a lot of people just aren't even aware of that. And we just get sucked along in this journey of, whether it's being an employee, being a business owner, an entrepreneur, and we just kind of accept what's in front of us every day. And we've always got the mountain of to-do lists and, Zoom calls. And we were just talking offline about you having a 10-day stretch of no Zooms and how wonderful that is. But we didn't evolve in that world, right? So we're in this constant overload and this constant stress state, and I think we've gotten away from the lifestyle that keeps us healthy. And so I started diving into that literature, sort of the longevity literature, brain health, and realized how preventable so much of these conditions were that I'm seeing. I'm running around putting out emergencies all day in the ER. I mean, people are coming in with all these strokes, and we're giving them blood thinners, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and people end up with these horrible outcomes that again are preventable. So I said, how in the world can I help more people and do that at scale? And that's where the entrepreneurial side starts to kick in, right? So at this point, I joined Justin Donald's mastermind lifestyle investor, who's a front row dad with you. I've just met some wonderful people through there and that whole network, and then got introduced to Amber through Justin. They've been friends for, gosh, I think almost 20 years. They're coming up on it. They're part of the Cutco Mafia, as so many are, right? The Halal Rods of the world, so on and so forth. So anyway, I reached out to Amber, and that would have been June 8th, I think. Yeah, around June 8th anyway, of last year. And June 10th, my best friend died completely unexpectedly, just out of nowhere. And Amber responds the next day, like, without knowing this, of course, like, I don't know if you believe in divine timing or not, but I just wrote this book about entrepreneurship and helping people launch their books, their businesses. And of course, my world's in shambles after having just sent her this email of, wanting to go help all these folks. And I said, okay, I don't know how many more signs I need that life is precious. We only get one chance. You don't know when it's going to be over. To carry my best friend Tanner's legacy forward, to go help more people. I mean, to do all these things, like, this is clearly the universe sending me a signal that now is the time. So I, obviously got through the grief and did all of that, healthy emotional processing. But once I was ready to reload, man, it's been gung-ho from there. We've launched Transcend Health, my business. I'm writing a book, as you know, which will be out this fall. And the mission is to help people live longer, healthier, more impactful lives. And all through just educating people on lifestyle and really just the basic, easy choices they have in front of them, and to integrate their why, which we can talk about too, because I think there are a lot of people that do the how thing, a lot of people that do the why and the legacy thing, but to blend it, I think that's the cornerstone.
Yeah. And I mean, something you said that I wrote down and circled 3 times is 70 to 90% of these long, quote unquote, long term, which, obviously sometimes it's not so long. Sometimes it hits you way earlier than most people might expect. But 70 to 90% of our cognitive, mental health outcomes are lifestyle driven. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, especially in the entrepreneurial grind. And I kind of joked with you, I'm like, my brain feels a little more healed just being off of Zoom for 10 days. And while I said that tongue in cheek, there's some truth to that, right? And I think a lot of people can relate to this constant stress or drive, or sometimes this fine balance between pushing and pursuing, which can lead to burnout. And these are the things we think about. Oh, this week felt this way, or next week felt this way. But then you project that out. And I have a personal anecdote that I'm sure many people can relate. So I'll share it. So for one, entire family lineage, very active in the military. My son's in the infantry and the army. And so very much feel blessed by the work that you've done there and continue to serve in that way. And my own father, he was 18 years older than my mom. And so, there's some built-in issues with that, but he also had many of the lifestyle factors that would lead to some issues, right? Like he was an alcoholic and had a pretty poor lifestyle. And he passed away 12 years ago now. And the last 5 years of his life were brutal with dementia and Alzheimer's, these cognitive declines. And this is like stuff you don't want to have to ever witness from anyone, especially a loved one. And I, of course, not having the medical training you did, I was sucked into the heart of this reality, I guess, of, wow, if he would have known 10 years, 20 years, 30 years back, the decisions he was making, how this was going to affect this quality or lack of quality of the end of his life. So I'm very tied to your mission without the skill set to address it. So I really appreciate you being here and be able to share and enlighten us, so that many of us who are in middle age or maybe a little before or after that can make better choices, than what maybe some of your relatives went through or what my own father went through. So I think we've got a very clear reason why you do what you do. There's a very clear mission here. You've been affected at multiple levels in your own life and your own military service, and then losing your close friend Tanner at this pivotal moment when you're making these new life choices for yourself. So maybe now we could transition a little bit into present day and talk about what you are doing with your business. I know what that was 9 months ago, less than a year ago, that you really officially jumped in and said, this is something I need to do, and started working on this thought leadership period of your life and writing and serving outside of just clinical and military applications. So yeah, like tell us a little bit about Transcend Health, what it's about, even down to like the offers, how you help people right now with this business.
Sure. And first off, Dustin, again, I'm so sorry to hear about what you went through with your father. I mean, this is a very common conversation that I have in the hospital week in and week out with people. And for those in your audience who are listening, if they don't have a similar story, they know someone who has a similar story. This is far too common. And on the trajectory that we're on, the incidence of Alzheimer's is expected to triple by 2050 for what that, which is horrifying. And again, it's no surprise when you look at the rates of obesity and what we call metabolic syndrome and metabolic disease, uncontrolled high blood pressure, just again, the general lifestyle factors that we know heavily influence these pathways that are totally correctable and avoidable. And there's about 1% of the population that has a gene mutation that predisposes them to early onset Alzheimer's, which is very uncommon. The other 99% is lifestyle. And I mean, if we really want to split that hair, there's some different genetic predispositions. There's something called the ApoE genotype or ApoE allele, and everybody's got some combination of that. And so there's about a quarter of the population are at higher risk, but it's not causal, meaning they've got to really, really mind their P's and Q's on the lifestyle more so than the average person. Everybody does, but that quarter of people especially have to.
If you don't mind camping out here a little bit, and maybe speaking specifically to someone who's in the quote unquote entrepreneurial lifestyle, right? And we kind of know what that means. It's someone who is ambitious and driven and goal oriented. And in our audience's case, very much out of service to mission. What sort of day-to-day changes or maybe things that people kind of adopt as part of this typical lifestyle should we really be aware of that could lead to this insane tripling of Alzheimer's for our generation as we get into older age? Like, what are some of the specific things we can do to actually prevent that?
Yeah. And first off, to double click on the entrepreneurial community, it saddens me too, because I'm around these people all the time that are just wildly, wildly successful business owners. And I mean, we're talking, 8, 9 figures, maybe in some cases 10-figure entrepreneurs, wildly successful people that just for whatever reason do not have their health under control. And I know the things to look for. I mean, I'm trained to do that, right? But I think it's really, really easy for people to get used to waking up every day, not feeling well, being chronically underslept, not eating the right things, because again, that checklist is so high. And this is a common story. And again, these people are in service to mission and to bettering humanity in the world. And my question, and this is where the why really comes in, is what are you working for? Right? I mean, why are you really doing this? And if you're not here, I mean, if your brain's not intact, if your body's not intact, you're not present, you can't show up for the world and you can't be your full self. And so therefore you are sabotaging that very mission, whether you realize it or not, without prioritizing yourself. And I think we do ourselves a disservice too, in that we, have this idea of selflessness in our culture, which is virtuous and is absolutely, I think there's some validity to that, but you have to be selfish in a way, meaning you have to take care of yourself so that you can show up and go do the things that are important that then allow the selfless acts to continue. So I just think people really skip over that. And the other thing is that our bodies, Dustin, are really, really, really good at hiding stuff for a long time. And dementia in particular, I'm talking about Alzheimer's, but dementia is just one of these where, I mean, there are preclinical changes that happen in the brain, meaning microscopic changes that you don't have a sensor for, your body can't detect for decades before the first misplaced keys or got lost walking through the neighborhood or asked the same questions over. I mean, the common stuff that shows up literally decades prior. And we are just now coming into a world where we have biomarker testing that's available and it's preliminary. I mean, there's some very expensive tests, like there are things called PET scans, which is an expensive brain scan. There are spinal fluid taps where we can look at different proteins that accumulate in people's brains. But we know this from just autopsies. People that don't have the first clinical symptom of Alzheimer's, they pass away of something else, unfortunately, likely preventable. But then they go through an autopsy and the medical examiners go, oh my gosh, this person looks like they had Alzheimer's, but they never had the first symptom because these changes have happened for years. And so there are these big brain banks of people where we know that they've got these risk factors that accumulate before the cognitive symptoms show up.
So yeah, like what I know this is a very loaded question, but if you had to pick three, like what are maybe the ones that people don't? I think most people think, yeah, if I'm 100 pounds overweight, I'm probably not doing myself any favors. If I drink soda 24 hours a day and just live off sugar, that's got to be bad for my brain. You mentioned sleep, and I imagine like stress. I wonder about some like alcohol. Are there these top three things that you're probably thinking this is okay, but this is going to really show up in 20 years? You're really going to regret these kind of day-to-day decisions that you're currently making?
So yeah, pretty perfect. And I didn't mean to tangent away from that. That's the question.
Your context was like what we needed. Maybe it's selfishly, I'm like, what do I need to take off the list of things I'm doing to ruin my brain right now? So
You nailed it. So I have what I call my core four. So, top three, top four, I mean, pick it. The core four is kind of easy. So sleep is absolutely on there. These are in no particular order, by the way. So I'll just list them out. Then we'll maybe go, tap into each one. So sleep, nutrition, so movement/exercise, and then stress management. Those are the big four. The mechanisms all interrelate with one another, meaning that if you have poor sleep, you're likely to have impaired fasting glucose, which affects your metabolic health. You're sleeping and you're tired. You might skip the gym. You tend to crave more sugary foods. I mean, so these things all interrelate, right? You feel more stressed because of all the above. You're not fueling your body with the right things. You're not managing. Anyway, so they all play together. It's a big symphony. But sleep, I mean, literally we could do a 3-hour talk on sleep, period. So I will try not to dive off.
We'll save that for Joe Rogan or one of those podcasts. But yeah, we could definitely hit the highlights of it though.
So the highlights, sleep is non-negotiable. The term "I'll sleep when I'm dead," that is literal nails on a chalkboard to me. So sleep has been conserved over millions of years of evolution, and most animals sleep in some fashion because it's that important. When you think about the opportunity cost of like getting eaten by a predator, natural disaster, like why are you just lights out for 8 or 9 hours a day? Well, it's because it's that important. But one of the big things that sleep does, that this is actually fairly new data within the last decade or so, that we have this system called the glymphatic system. This actually wasn't even known when I was in medical school. This came out halfway through med school, which is wild to even think about that we didn't know this. So there's this fluid flow through your brain that basically washes your brain of harmful proteins and waste products. That system is mostly active while you sleep. It's a little bit of activity during the day, but it's 90+% active during sleep, during quality sleep. And it pulls away some of these proteins that accumulate. These are the changes I'm talking about on the brains that the medical examiners see. And we're going, oh my gosh, this person looks like they have Alzheimer's. So it pulls that stuff out of your brain. That only happens while you sleep. So if you imagine over years and decades, you're not getting enough sleep, you're building up these toxic metabolites, these proteins, they're slowly gunking up your neurons, creating more inflammation. That becomes a negative feed forward cycle, and it only accelerates the process. And by the way, the more that goes on, the more it interferes with your sleep architecture. So it makes it worse. So sleep is non-negotiable. There's a whole list of things there's great content out there. We talk about sleep in Transcend Health. I'll come back to that. But anyway, sleep, definitely got to do it, right? Not something to sacrifice. You treat it like air because it's that important, right? Movement. Again, we can spend days on movement. If we could spend 3 hours on sleep. But in general, I want people to intentionally think about integrating movement into their day. We're designed to move. I'm in my office. I don't have a chair in my office. I have a standing desk, and that's how I'm talking to you. It improves your spinal alignment, your posture. You burn 50 calories more an hour by standing, by using your anti-gravity muscles, which adds up over time in terms of maintaining lean mass. I've got a walking pad, under desk treadmill that I can turn on to get your 10,000 steps a day, which lowers your chance of dying by anything up to 40%, lowers your dementia risk by almost 40%. And that's just like walking and getting up and standing. That's not even dedicated strength training, cardiovascular training, high intensity interval training. There's so much to do that has its own benefits. So movement is non-negotiable. You've got to do it. Each different type has its benefits. Again, before I'll pull myself out of that deep dive before we go down it. So that's definitely a core pillar. Nutrition. So again, nutrition is very nuanced. So this is a tougher one. And I'm sure you and your audience have experienced this, but there are a lot of diet camps out there, and these camps tend to run in kind of fads and cycles. So, I get people that are like the carnivore diets become popular lately. Not if you're a carnivore person, I'm not hating on you. And then I think there are things that carnivore diet gets right, i.e. low carbohydrate, high protein. Those are good things. But what is it not doing? Well, it's not getting you enough fiber. And it turns out fiber is pretty darn important for your gut microbiome to help clean your gut out, to manufacture what are called short-chain fatty acids, which are little gut microbes that produce neurotransmitters. So 90 to 95% of your serotonin, which we think about as a brain hormone because it mostly is, it's made in your gut. And if your gut bacteria aren't healthy, then you don't feel well. So if you want an easy fix to just your mood period, eat some more fiber. It's very helpful. And carnivore diet, may not do that, as an example. Again, I'm not picking on the carnivore people. And people have their reasons for doing one thing over another. But I think for a long time, the evidence has been very unclear. And again, people tend to gravitate towards these tribes. And again, when you think about how we evolved in tribes. People feel safe around like-minded folks, the entrepreneurial community. We've got 7-Figure Leap. We've got Transcend Health. It's just how we are, right? We have to be aware of that. But I try to approach this from an evidence-based perspective, meaning like, what do we know actually works? What do we know is healthy for the brain?
On the nutrition front, if I may, because as you were talking about and you have all the right terms, my layman's term is cleaning out the gunk, right? Like one thing I've heard a lot more about recently with that is fasting. The idea that when you get into like a 72-hour fast, it does this regeneration, there's stem cell production. Is there truth to that? Is fasting a advisable part of a nutrition plan, and whether it be an intermittent fast on a daily basis or like a 1 to 3 day fast on a periodic basis?
Great question. Yes. So again, this is very nuanced, meaning what works for one person may not work for another person. So for example, intermittent daily fasting or time restricted eating is another name for that. Would be getting your calories in a limited window. So somewhere between 12 to 16 hours of not consuming calories, or 8 to 16 that you're getting food in. The idea there is that you're giving your body a chance to recycle some of the gunk, which is a great way to put it. I mean, that term is called autophagy. Yeah, exactly.
That's the word. I knew there was a word, autophagy. Yes. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. Which literally means self-eating. So that's a way that your cells clean themselves out. So that pathway is upregulated by a handful of things. So exercise is one way that helps this, although it's a complex path, but fasting is another way. So is it intermittent daily fasting versus, 3-day, 5-day, quarterly, monthly? I mean, there are different ways that work. The whole idea is allowing that pathway to turn on for long enough that it's doing something and helping you maintain those systems. The big problem I have with the longer duration fast, so the 3-day, 5-day water only fast, over time, it appears that most people that do that have a loss of protein, and that turns into cycling or increased muscle cell turnover. And that's a problem for a few reasons. Number one, muscle is incredibly metabolically active. Again, our metabolism is a cornerstone to our health. So the higher your basal metabolic rate, the more energy efficient your body is. The higher that correlates with longevity, so does strength. You have strength, lean muscle, right? So all that kind of fits together. So a way around that, I have no relationship to this guy or his work, but there's something called the fasting mimicking diet that's been proposed by a guy named Walter Longo. He wrote a book called The Longevity Diet a few years ago that I love. He gets into the neuroinflammation and the neurodegenerative stuff and all the autophagy. But the whole idea is that it's not 0 calorie, it's just very low calorie. I think it's low protein, high fat, low carbohydrate. I think I've got that right. But the point is you're getting something, and it seems to preserve protein, which is important. Because after 30, we lose about 1 to 2% of our muscle mass a year. And that only gets worse as we get older, especially after age 60. And you preferentially lose what are called type 2 fibers, which are the quick twitch strength fibers. So you think about standing up out of a chair, walking, balancing, all those things. That becomes a real problem the older we get. And we've got to maintain those. Those are use it or lose it. Because those stem cells you were talking about earlier, they don't work as well as we age. Our stem cells dysfunctioning is actually a problem with our senescence or our cellular senescence, which is another big hallmark of aging as we get older. And so we lose the muscle, it can't come back. So you really have to maintain it. And people that are doing these prolonged water-only fasts are at risk for losing more muscle. So that's an issue I have with that option. And some people tolerate it well. And other people, they get headaches. They feel terrible. So the flip side for that is, if you don't want to eat in a limited window, there seems to be comparative data, meaning the similar outcomes for people that practice what's called caloric restriction. So meaning if you are taking in slightly less than you need every day, enough to maintain a lean mass over time, that appears to have many of the same benefits as fasting does. And there are camps in the scientific community with both of these. There's lots of healthy debate there. My stance is somewhere in the middle. I think both are healthy. And again, this has got to be individualized to the right person. That's sort of my take on that.
Well, that's super useful. I appreciate you letting me nerd out on that. That was a bit of a selfish question. Fasting tends to work really well for me. I feel really good when I particularly like the intermittent, restricted eating windows. That's been an antidote to me for the lifestyle that I choose of being very busy during the day and very active here, like on Zoom. And we're going to talk about stress, which is probably kind of the hallmark one that entrepreneurs in particular can relate to. But the things I wrote down, and again, I'm not trying to cliff notes this is your entire work, the core 4, but if you sleep 8 hours a day, around there, you're doing a huge benefit to yourself. If you're eating clean, particularly high in protein to maintain some muscle mass and not missing out on fiber, because that kind of blew my mind that 90% of what you need in the sense of, you get the right words for it. There's like a 90% effect of what's produced in your gut that has a direct effect on your brain health. And fiber is a really key part of that. And that's a part that I think a lot of us with some of these more fad diets will dismiss is like, so fiber is super important. And then the other thing that kind of blew my mind, you're like, if you have 10,000 steps a day, it's a 40% reduction in Alzheimer's risk. And then there's a 40% improvement in another thing. What was that one?
It also 40% risk of thereabout, I think it's 38, 39 in all-cause mortality. So your risk of dying of anything goes down by about 40% if you just walk 10,000 steps a day, which by the way is like, I don't know, 3.5 miles or something. Like it's not heroic.
That's remarkable. So as a quick antidote to those 3 of the 4 big 4s, we talked about sleep, the just really not like exotic, but responsible nutrition that you do consistently, and then moving 10,000 steps a day, even if, a chunk of that is by having a standing desk and maybe getting a treadmill functionality at your desk. Or one of the things I like to do, I do a lot of Zoom calls, but when I have a break from Zoom calls, I will go walk. I'll just go outside and walk. If I'm going to do Voxer messages or make a quick phone call, instead of sitting and doing that, at least I'll get out and I'll move. And I do get those 10,000 steps a day most days. And I think that that's a really good benchmark for someone who otherwise is a slave to their desk and doesn't get out and move enough. So that leaves us with the 4th of the core 4. And then we'll actually talk about your business. But we kind of move the teaching moment from the end of the podcast to the middle is stress. I feel like this is the one I hear about all the time and on calls or in mastermind groups or whatever. It's sort of the real common enemy of the entrepreneur is stress. So like, how do we combat stress? And when a lot of us are sort of self-inducing stress in the lifestyle choices we're making and how we're doing our work.
Yes. And one more on the diet thing, just because we've double clicked on Alzheimer's so much, but a tablespoon, this is 7 grams of extra virgin olive oil a day, has been linked to about another 28% reduction in dementia risk for what that's worth, which again, there are tons of reasons for that. Your brain's about 60% fat, and it's olive oil. Fresh olive oil has got a lot of work called polyphenols and antioxidants, helps with neuroinflammation. So you've got building blocks for the brain, you've got improved inflammation, so on and so forth. So another fun one. Yes, whole food, non-processed, plus your fiber, your protein, your olive oil, all good. Anyway, just want to throw it out there. Stress management. So first off, the first 3 pillars, by the way, if you are able to maximize those, that by definition lowers stress. Because when you're well rested, when you're sleeping well, when you wake up, we've all had that great feeling of, oh man, I got a great night's sleep, right? When you're maybe on vacation in St. Augustine and you're not work, right? And that's, again, it's amazing what we get used to, because that becomes the minority experience, right? That becomes the treat on vacation, not I get to wake up feeling this good every day. Like that's how we should all be waking up every day and feeling, right? Not some remote thing we get for like 2 weeks a year, if that, it's the average vacation time or whatever. So anyway, prioritizing sleep will absolutely help with stress management, helps with mood, helps with focus, right? All the things. So that's easy. The right types of dedicated exercise help with memory formation, which helps with focus, which helps people throughout their workday. Same thing with nutrition. Obviously, the right fuel in your body is going to help you perform better, so on and so forth. I mean, that already moves the needle tremendously for what that's worth. But assuming people are doing all that and feeling like, man, I'm still stuck, I don't know, there's some other useful tips and things I think that really help. One is, how is your brain designed to work? Your brain makes up about 2% of your entire body weight. So based on your whole mass, very small, burns 20% of your body's entire energy. Incredibly, incredibly expensive organ to run. Again, most important in the body, makes sense. Very energy intensive process. So because it burns really hot, it can't do that really well or efficiently for more than about 90 minutes at a time before you really need a break. There are these rhythms in your body that sort of regulate that. So if you time block work, if you're an entrepreneur, right? So I've got all my Zoom meetings, my schedule, my whatever. Don't put work more than about 90 minutes together at a time without taking the Dustin break to go outside and just stretch and breathe and move, right? That's a perfect opportunity to go get some of your steps in like you're doing, and to just push away from the work, push away from the screens. That's a really easy one to build in. So about every 90 minutes, I just tell people take 10 to 15 minutes off and just go outside and move. And honestly, I think the workplace should be structured this way. Instead of sitting in the cubicle all day where people, maybe they're productive for an hour or however long, or maybe they've just slammed like 3 jelly donuts and they immediately have an insulin, spike and crash, and then they're asleep on their desk and not get any work done, or all they can do is scroll Facebook or whatever, right? I mean, like we've seen this. So not healthy or conducive.
And we've seen our doctors do it. My brother's an EMT. I'm like, he has the worst lifestyle. He's working 12 hours at a time, sitting in an ambulance. And I'm just like, wow, like it's the healthcare professionals are sometimes the ones who don't get the break and don't get to take care of their lifestyle in this way.
Dustin, do you know how many nutrition courses I had in medical school?
How many?
Zero.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Doctors do not learn nutrition. I have had to teach myself this and learn it and go seek knowledge on my own. And look at the average physician. They're not healthy people, which fits with the general statistic. 93% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy, which means we don't have optimal blood pressure, body mass index, levels of cholesterol, fats in the bloodstream, blood sugar, all that stuff. At least one of those parameters is off. And not some, not most, almost all of us.
93%. Wow.
93%.
Okay.
It is a horrifying number. And when you think about the ramifications for all the preventable stuff that we are headed towards, no surprise, which only leads to more stress and inflammation, so on and so forth. So anyway, back to our regularly scheduled program, back to stress management. 90 minutes with 10 to 15 minutes off, easy, push away, get up, move. That's a good opportunity. Just get outside, get some fresh air. That's an easy one. What else can you do? There's a whole bunch. So if you're really feeling spun up, one thing I love to do is one of two things. Either meditation, so being mindful. You can do that in your 10 to 15 minute breaks too. The whole idea is that you are disengaging your fight or flight system, which is called your sympathetic nervous system. That gets us ready for battle or run, to fight the tribe or run away from the bear, whatever. It's fight or flight. The opposite of that is your parasympathetic nervous system. So what does this do? It allows us to calm down, lowers heart rate, lowers blood pressure, gets us in a relaxed state, actually allows us to focus. And when you're in that sympathetic mode, by the way, the fight or flight mode, your connections to your frontal lobes, which is what you used to think and plan, get knocked offline. You can't think and process information very efficiently. So you're in a more frantic state anyway. You're less efficient. And over time, when you stay in that state, you have an elevated sympathetic tone that actually correlates with decreased longevity overall. So meaning people tend to live shorter lifespans. Why? Well, because you're stressed out all the time, your cortisol's elevated, your blood pressure's elevated, all the changes, map that out 30, 40 years, and congratulations, heart attack, stroke, Alzheimer's, whatever, right? I don't mean to be whatever, you get it. So
yeah, no, I totally get it. And double click, I guess, on this too. I think one thing that the people I work with, and something I used to sort of a false badge I used to wear was, I'm on Zoom for 12 hours or whatever. Like, yeah, look at me. Well, ultimately we control this, right? And so even if you're an entrepreneur, you set your Calendly schedule just to make this really practical, right? So build in the 30-minute breaks. And like you mentioned, meditation, breath work. One of the things I like to do in my walks a couple times a day, I call them God walks. As a person of faith, it's maybe a different form of meditation. It's just like a unplugged sort of like conversation with God. And I'm just walking and I don't have a phone and I'm just, having this sort of offline conversation with a higher being. And to me, that's a very calming, and I guess it's the parasympathetic, puts me into that state so that by the time I get back to my office, I feel completely reset and refreshed. And so everyone does have the ability, especially as an entrepreneur. I mean, one of the ironic thing is one of the reasons we want to have our own business and be an entrepreneur is to escape that cubicle, control our own schedule, and then we become our own worst enemies, chain ourselves to our desks, sit all day and never get a break. And ultimately you do that to yourself. And I'm speaking, of course, to myself, but also to a lot of our listeners who maybe are sitting here like, that sounds great. How do I do that? Well, like you have to do that. Like you get to choose it and you get to build it into your schedule, right?
You nailed it, Dustin. And so that's schedule point number 2 is exactly what you just said. And that is leave time in your week. And there are any number of ways you can do this. So not just the 90 minutes with the 15-minute breaks, but time block chunks of time off for you. So time to take the God walk, time to go to the gym if that's your thing, time to spend with your family, and just protected time just to be by yourself. One of my favorite things to do is to leave my phone on do not disturb mode. I tend to do this when I'm at the gym because it's sort of like my Zen time or whatever, or even if I'm in the sauna, which we can go to sauna cold plunge too, great stress reduction techniques and cardiovascular health. But as entrepreneurs, we have the calendar and we see an empty spot and we fill it, right? And that's just what we do. And it's important to treat that time, back to putting you first, right? Being selfish, put you, time block time for you and your family, because you've got to have that. Number one, you got to have that reset button. It's non-negotiable like sleep, number one. Number two, not only getting you out of the sympathetic state into the parasympathetic state, is when some of like the best breakthroughs happen. So like if you really want a productivity hack or whatever, do that. It's like the shower moments where like you have the greatest idea ever in the shower and you got to go write it down or whatever. Like it's not because you're in the shower. It's because you aren't doing anything else. You don't have your phone in your hand. You're not on a Zoom call. You're not having to be on the stage. You're having these moments of like where your subconscious is allowed to process what you're going through. And we don't leave enough time for that in our culture. again, I mean, the rate and sheer volume of information that our brains have to filter and process today is not what we were designed to handle. I mean, you and I, in terms of bits of information, we take in more in a day than our ancestors probably did in like a month, right? I mean, it's just crazy to even think about. So time blocking is incredibly important. And if we have time for one more before we have to.
One more, and then we'll use our last 10 minutes to talk about how you're actually helping people do this with Transcend Health. But yeah, one more on stress, and then we'll move on to talking more about your business and what you're up to.
Wonderful. Well, one that I've just seen more in social media. This has been in the literature for at least the last handful of years. So it's something I've followed, but alcohol consumption. And I'm sure your audience is, familiar with it. And, this is part of our culture, and I think a decision that everybody has to make. But my general stance and my take in the literature is that there is no proven medical benefit of consuming alcohol, period. That is what it is. I'll skip the metabolic mechanisms, but it's metabolized into a toxin that can impact your brain, your liver, your whole body. It's a poison, effectively, is what it turns into. It happens to be a poison that makes us feel good for a period of time, and it offers an escape from all the stress of daily life, which is why people gravitate towards it, and helps with, again, back to our frontal lobe effects and social behaviors, et cetera. So, it makes sense why people do it. So I'm not throwing stones in a glass house. I choose to have a nice glass of wine every now and then, or like a good German beer, right? So I still choose to do these things sparingly because I do enjoy the flavor. But there have been so much data lately on quality data, mind you, on people that even just have a drink a day. So I used to recommend this to my patients. This is what I was trained to tell people: is 2 drinks for men and 1 drink for women, which also is just sexist as hell and just whatever. Anyway, I'll skip that. But that really just a 1 alcoholic unit a day, it doesn't matter, beer, wine, hard liquor, results in substantial thinning of the cortex. These are where your brain cells live on the outside of your brain, thins the cortex, and over time can lead to back to dementia. Literally, I see patients that drink maybe more than a drink a day that are heavy drinkers. But there's a specific type of dementia that alcohol itself causes over time because of the destruction of all the neurons and the impaired metabolism of B vitamins, so on and so forth. So that sets you on that path, 1. But 2, alcohol is very stressing to the body. It elevates the body's stress responses. And so it's a depressant when it comes on board, but when it wears off, you get this rebound spike of all your stress hormones. And so I think when most people, get off from work or it's the weekend, they want to unwind, they're actually starting to feel a little miniature withdrawal, and they look to that as a comfort to go, oh gosh, there's my drinking. I can unwind, I can relax. And everybody's on that roller coaster. We just don't realize it because, you don't have to drink to the point that you're intoxicated to feel that. But that's a really easy one for people to just stop. And it may take a couple of weeks for most people to kind of get past that, but the mental clarity, the decreased levels of stress, long-term brain health, the benefits are endless. Lowered cancer risk, I could go on and on.
I appreciate you bringing it up. I might have shared this in our personal conversation. I gave up alcohol on my 45th birthday, which was coming up on a year ago. Very much like you described, it was a social thing. But as I got honest with it, I'm like, why am I really doing this? It was a stress blocker in a sense, right? Like, I want to check out. So I'm going to I'm going to have a drink or have a couple of drinks and have an excuse to go have drinks with people to make it social and in my own reality. And of course, that was like the core issue with my own dad and the dementia and all the things he dealt with. I'm sure it was heavily influenced by that, a whole life full of overconsumption of alcohol. So I gave it up about a year ago. That's the number one thing I can say hands down, without a doubt. That's like the number one thing I've done that I've noticeably felt way better and more productive and more mental clarity, and it improved my sleep and it improved my eating habits. Like all the core 4 for me were directly affected by removing alcohol from my life. And if you do want to deep dive on this, obviously you can go to Ryan and his resources. For me, I'd listened to this long podcast on the Huberman Lab podcast all about the effects of alcohol on your brain. And it blew my mind, to use a crude term. And I was like, oh, and it wasn't in that moment that I decided to stop. But for me, I took a break through doing 75 hard, through doing a different sort of protocol and a challenge. And then I started just really asking myself, like, what benefits is this providing me? I can feel a lot of benefits of not doing it, but why do I keep going back to it? And so when I finally just took it out as an option, I'm just not doing it. For anyone listening who's sort of sober curious or like, man, I wonder if that could be a needle mover. I think for many of us in our culture and the entrepreneurial lifestyle, and I can only speak from personal experience, that's been the number one change for me that I think has affected all the core 4. I wasn't going to necessarily bring it up. I'm really grateful that you did. But as you were talking about all these things, I'm like, yeah, when I quit drinking, I did all these things better. And it was a very simple choice, but a pretty profound impact.
Thank you for sharing, Dustin. I mean, I've had a similar experience, and I don't know if any of your audience may wear some kind of a sleep tracker, like a Whoop band. I have an Oura ring that I wear, which is really
Yeah, even my Apple Watch, even like my resting heart rate dropped like 10 beats a minute when I eliminated alcohol from my life.
it's unbelievable. I mean, like I said, even on a night that, like my birthday was like one of the last nights I think I had 2 glasses of wine. It was last month, and I mean, my sleep score was horrible. My heart rate variability dropped. My heart rate spiked. I had to give a speech the next day, and I was all shaky. I felt terrible. I'm like, this is wild. Like when you really, again, you remove yourself from the equation and jump back into something like that. I mean, it really is striking. So anyway, yes, there's plenty of data behind this, and again, it is a personal choice. And again, please know that Dustin and I support you. If that's a thought for anyone who's listening.
Yeah, and if you need any support or want to talk to someone about that, I'm happy to be a resource. It's something that comes up a lot in our mastermind now. I've sort of led this just by example. I've never preached to anyone else you should or shouldn't drink, but we had an in-person retreat that you mentioned in St. Augustine, and I kind of found myself looking around. I'm like, no one's drinking, and that's pretty remarkable for a group of 20 entrepreneurs who are on a beach. It's just like no one was, and it wasn't a prescriptive thing. It was just sort of like what we've become as a group, and I think it's just a lot of people that are wanting to optimize their health and optimize their impact in the world, and this was a choice we can make. It was a pretty easy choice to make a big impact. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. But let's talk about Transcend Health. Let's talk about how you help people. And if people are like, man, I need some more Dr. Ryan Williamson in my life, like how do you work at this current time? And of course, we want to talk about the book before we run out of our time today.
Of course. Well, I appreciate the opportunity. So transcendhealthgroup.com, which I'm happy to get you if you don't have that, is our website. And there are really 3 main ways that people can get involved now if they want to. I did recently start private coaching. I was very resistant to it for a long time. I'll spare you that story. But I do for people that really need a high level of how to optimize, again, their core 4. But if you're a busy business owner, you're experiencing cognitive fatigue, stress, any of this that's of concern, which turns out, again, as most people, as I have found, I'm here to help. I mean, that's really why I made the decision to do it, because the need was there. And like once I opened the door, like people just started pouring in. I'm like, all right, fine. It's not very scalable, which is one of the reasons I didn't want to do it. But anyway, here to help, happy to do it. So that's one model. We do have a group membership. So this is an ongoing month-to-month membership called the Longevity and Legacy Membership. So it's a mastermind type community where you can share stories with fellow entrepreneurs, hang out, network. We use Circle as our private membership portal, which is great. Circle. Yeah, Circle's awesome. Actually, I can toggle between Lifestyle Investor too, which is perfect. I don't just log in and I'm there. But anywho, but I do bi-monthly Zoom calls. So for example, the call on Thursday is on microplastics, which is a whole horrifying new threat that we're just starting to look about. Speaking of anxiety and stress management, I'm going to put some debriefs with people after that call. We talk about...
They're going to want to drink after they learn about microplastics.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. We'll do alcohol, we'll do sleep, or just movement, whatever. I mean, whatever the topic of the day is, there's always something some educational point. And at the start of that membership, which was last fall, I took people through really what I call the foundational content. And as new members come into the community, they can certainly watch old calls and get up to speed. But then I thought, well, how can I fast track people that want to join the membership? So we then have what we call our coaching cohort. So it's a smaller group of people, kind of designed to be 5 or 10 at a time. And I take them through about an 8-week program that's 10 sessions. And it does follow, it parallels the book, but it gives you everything you need to know in short order to get you up to speed on all the lifestyle metrics and just a deeper dive on basically what you and I are covering today, plus a lot more. And so then people feel pretty empowered, pretty educated after that. The membership is included for that duration. So people get to sample both and they can transition into the membership, or if they think, hey, that was great, but I need some extra help, private coaching. So there are just different ways to pivot all around there. Of course, we got the book coming out. That'll be September 9th is the publication date. So very excited. It is my first book. So this has been a learning process for me, to say the least. Have you written a book or no?
I did, actually. I wrote a marriage book. So my very first online business was in marriage. So I've written a marriage book. I am currently in the process of my entrepreneurial book. So it's a lot of work, and it's definitely got to have a passion and mission behind why you're doing it to get it done. So kudos to you for embarking on that. So can you share a little bit? I don't know if you have a title you want to share or unveil here, and a little bit about like who the book's for. And obviously we can't quite get it, but we can mark our calendars for September 9th when it comes out.
Of course. Yeah. So you know all about this whole process then. So again, it's been a journey for me, and it is a lot of work. And that's how important the mission is to me, is to get this word out to more people at scale. So, I mean, obviously more people can read a book than I could ever, hope to have one-on-ones with, right? So The Incredible Brain is the title. Yep. So that's going to be it. And then I think there's a subtitle. It's like proven strategies for living a longer, healthier, more impactful life or something like that, or evidence-based strategies, one of the two, which is all true either way. But the book really is for any, so I write to an avatar, which is the Amber method, if you've ever come across the way that she does this. But so my avatar is this 37-year-old guy named Steven. He's married to Sarah. They've got 2 kids. He's a busy finance professional. His weight is starting to slip. He's starting to get the receding hairline, gray hair. So that's, we can all relate to that in some fashion, right? But that doesn't just mean
his name could be Dustin. He could be 45. Yes, I got you.
But that's the point, right? It could be a 90-year-old grandmother, and she could be Steven. So it's not restricted to young people. It's certainly not restricted to males. It's for anybody who wants to learn more about how their brain and their body works, how to manage their life more effectively, how to find their purpose. Again, chapter 1 is literally find your why. And it's getting people clear on what are you doing all this for? Like I said earlier, what's your purpose in life and what drives you? What's your motivation? What are your passions, to really get people activated and thinking about that? Because again, you mentioned Huberman, who I love. I think he puts out great content, and certainly has had people on that have done this, but a lot of that kind of content is how content, and core 4 is how, right? So, it's lifestyle, it's building in all these different, therapies and treatments. And there's absolutely, you can't ignore that. You got to do it. But I think when people are so busy and they're disconnected from their why and their deeper mission, it's like, dude, I've already got 500 things to do today. I don't need one more. I don't need to go to the gym, or I don't need to go buy this olive oil or whatever the thing is, right? Yeah. But when you understand the purpose and how it improves your performance and gets you closer to your goals and what's important, then it becomes an integrated, aligned part of your life, and you get to do more of it, right? That's the disconnect that I think a lot of people miss. And that's a huge, the book is centered around that essentially.
Starting with why, and not just a general why, because we're going to have a tripling of Alzheimer's by 2050, but like your why. Like, why is this important to you, and why do you need to make changes and tweaks and optimizations, and why is it worth your time and your energy to recalibrate towards some of these things that aren't debatable? They're scientific fact, and you've got obviously all the evidence to back up what is effectively simple, right? Like, that's what the most important things in life, of course, are really easy to do and easy not to do, and therefore we tend to sometimes not do them, and then we have these long-term issues. So I love the name, The Incredible Brain, and I love the fact that you start with a focus on why and helping people get clear on their why and their purpose behind why this is so important to them and the things that they care about, because some of the things I care about aren't the same as what you care about. But it sounds like regardless of why you're doing it, you need to be plugged into that. And then that's going to really help you inform the how and actually do some of the best practices that you can prescribe to us through, I guess, what would be the rest of the book.
Yes. So why is up front. Part 1 is sort of how does your body work? What can go wrong? Right. So that's sort of that. And then there's a lot of kind of how to fix it peppered in there just to give hope, because it gets pretty dark if I don't do that. But then, so that's part 1. Part 2 is just how do you fix it? So what are the mechanisms you can put in place? And to your very point, Dustin, it is simple. And I think that's like one of my biggest challenges with people is they're like, yeah, I've heard all this before. And it's not some sexy new peptide or go fly here and get these stem cells or some new GLP-1, Ozempic. Okay, those things will have their place for the right application. But again, like the vast majority is simple stuff that we just can't overlook. If people aren't doing the basics and aren't aligned, the rest of it is just, you're wasting a lot of money for, no good reason, in my opinion.
Man, I told Ryan 30 minutes. We're at 52, so I have to honor his time and end it here, but maybe we'll have you back. We could do a whole deep dive on alcohol and entrepreneurship or sleep or nutrition. To your point, the core 4 is fascinating. And of course, I'm a bit of a junkie for some of the optimizations and some of the simplicity behind some of this stuff. And just the thing that blew my mind in this interview is the profound impact of some of these simple changes that you can totally control and you can totally incorporate into the busiest of lifestyles that aren't taking away from your busy lifestyle. They're actually fueling it and helping you live your mission in a bigger way. So we're all going to eagerly anticipate the release of the book. I'll be your biggest fan. I'll definitely help you promote that. Today, as people are listening to this and the book's not quite ready for us, if people want some more of your insights and they want to know more about how you can help, what is the next best step for people, Ryan, to get over into your world?
Yeah, so just have them come over to transcendhealthgroup.com. And again, there's an easy way to just send us an email that way. I've got some great free content on there as well. So I've got a video on sleep optimization, just a quick 15-minute download that comes with a little worksheet and a PDF too. There's one on stress management, one on brain health optimization. So those are the big 3 I think people can nab on there. And then, then from there, if people want to try out the membership or schedule a Zoom call with me just to hear more if they're interested in one route or another, I'd be more than happy to talk to anybody. And of course, I'm on social media too. So that's at Dr. Williamson, and then at Transcend Health Group. So you can follow along there. Try to put up videos at least a few times a week to share information that way as well. And then we have our newsletter and so on and so forth. So,
well, you're doing great work, and it's clear it's coming from your heart, it's coming from your own experience and all these different settings and all the different things that you've been through and that you've witnessed and all this amazing neurological work that you've been called to do. So I'm very grateful to call you a friend and a colleague, and I'm really grateful that you took so much time and poured in to all this value to our community today, Ryan. So transcendhealthgroup.com, that's the home base. Go there, get on the email newsletter. I think the 8-week cohort in particular really kind of spoke to me as a let's get in and have a structured way to implement this and make it part of our lifestyle, because there's no time like the present to make some of these changes, because they're just the most important changes you can make. It's not the 80-20, it's like the 199. Like, this is the 1% that you really have to treat well to have an optimal life. And I love the core question of why are you doing all this? And if you're doing all this because you want to live a more fulfilling, happy life, you have a family you care about, the number one thing you got to do to fuel all that in your business and all the people you want to help is to take care of yourself, and especially take care of your brain. So Ryan, thank you again so much for being here. Go to transcendhealthgroup.com and get plugged into Ryan's world.
Thank you so much, Dustin. It's been an absolute pleasure.